All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much and welcome to the final day, final hour, I think, of Galaxy 2023. So happy to have you here. I am happy to present to you all our final session, Increasing Developer Velocity with GitHub Enterprise. We've got some great folks here, going to share some tips and tricks and tools by which you can get your developer teams up to speed, moving faster. I am John Peck. And Glenn, if you don't mind going forward a couple of slides here, we're going to jump into some housekeeping things. So I'm manager of enterprise advocacy here at GitHub in the Americas, about 25 years as a developer, and I'll be helping out today by moderating this chat between our two distinguished principal solutions engineers. But before we get to them, a few housekeeping tips, just things to know. There is in front of you a chat option. Go ahead and drop those questions in there, drop them in the chat or drop them in the Q&A. We'll pull them out. We'll try and make them at stop points in the presentation, surface the most important questions, answer everything else that we can't get to live in the chat if we can get to it. Also want to point out, you should have on your screen somewhere a request a demo or schedule a meeting with us option. So if there's something you want to go deep with us on that we haven't talked about here, you just want to get more involved in GitHub Enterprise, go ahead and whack that button. We'll make sure that somebody gets back to you. All right, with no further ado, I'd like to pass off the mic to Sarah Khalife. Take it away.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, John. Nice to meet you all. I'm Sarah Khalife. I'm the Enterprise Solutions Engineer from, I'm in California right now, so I'm in San Francisco. Let us know where you are all coming from in the chat. We'll love to hear from everybody from all over the place. I am a solutions engineer. I've been at GitHub for about 3.5 years. Previous to that, I was a software engineer working on cloud platform deployments, microservices. So I can speak to a lot of the different components that we'll be chatting about today. And then my awesome background that I love this photo because I actually took this photo and it's from an island in Greece in Rhodes. And I was lucky enough to be there on a peaceful, beautiful day, and there wasn't many tourists. So I was lucky enough to take this beautiful picture. And I'll pass it over to Glenn.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to take back control over here, start sharing my screen again.
Love that screen inception.
It's a live demo. Hey, everybody. We are super excited to have you here. My name is Glenn, and yes, Sarah and I are sitting next to each other, presenting from GitHub HQ in San Francisco. If you're ever in San Francisco, drop us a line. We'd love to have you at our office. We have a pretty awesome office here. Yeah, so I'm a solutions engineer on the enterprise team here in the West. I have the pleasure of working with our largest customers, companies who I deeply admire, some of the largest companies in the world, a lot of innovation happening in this area. Yeah, and then just a little bit about me. I've been working at GitHub now for about 3.5, going on 4 years. It's been a pretty wild ride since 2019. The volcano that you see in the background, so while I'm not on the computer, I like to do adventurous things. And that's not movie magic there. That's 1,200 feet from that volcano. So back in 2021, that's the Geldingadalur eruption in Iceland. And if we have any Icelandic folks on the call right now, I probably didn't pronounce that correctly. But if you want to go there right now, by the way, that volcano is dormant. So you'll have to wait for another earthquake and for that to re-erupt. But I highly recommend it. And outside of that, I like cycling and mountain biking and running and doing all that fun stuff. So we have an exciting agenda for you today. The name of the talk is Accelerating Your Development with GitHub Enterprise, and we have a lot of exciting things to share with you. GitHub has changed significantly since even I joined in 2019, and we're building a lot of excellent products here for you to use and to make you more productive. So we segmented this into 3 different buckets here of developer productivity with Copilot, developer efficiency with Actions, and then lastly, security is forefront for everybody, our advanced security offering. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So I just want to remind folks that it's the most exciting time for GitHub today. We're larger than ever. And in January, we announced that we are now over 100 million developers. And that number is probably small now. It's probably way bigger. And we work with pretty much every company on earth, whether it be for private source code, that they're doing behind their firewall with our enterprise product, or also too for their open source program office or their open source source code. In some capacity, we work with pretty much every company, and it's extremely exciting. So first, what we're going to tackle is developer productivity. What we want to do is that we want to accelerate software development. Developers today are tasked with doing more than ever, and there's fewer time to actually do what you're paid to do, which is developing software. So we want to make the time that you do spend developing software as efficient as we possibly can, and that's exactly where our mind's at. So I know this is like a hot topic right now. There's a lot of excitement, even though every demo I give might be touching other parts of our product. Everybody always asks me about Copilot, and if you read Twitter or if you read Hacker News or read anything, you're going to be hearing about it. So let's talk about what this is and how this can help you. So simply stated, GitHub Copilot is an extension that lays within VS Code or NeoVim or Visual Studio Desktop or the JetBrains IDEs. What we've done is that we partner with OpenAI on a model called Codex. Codex is a derivative of GPT that we specifically trained on GitHub source code. So all the public source code that exists within GitHub is what we train this model on. And what it helps you do is that it's your AI pair programmer. So think about like IntelliSense when it first came out. This is a generational improvement to that, meaning that it doesn't just autocomplete the line that you're currently coding in. It can create entire methods and synthesize results that go well beyond what IntelliSense could ever do. And this is extremely helpful. The way in which it does this is it grabs context from your file. So you don't have to tell Copilot what language that you happen to be developing in. It doesn't require per repo configuration. Copilot is automatically able to determine what language your file is in and start offering you suggestions based upon what's in that file. What it does too is that it understands contextually what's in your file and what you're naming everything. And really what it's doing is that it's doing a combination of like a web search, Stack Overflow, and then like an autocomplete. And we're really excited about it. I want to engage with the audience here too. If you've been using Copilot, we'd love to hear about what it's helping you with, what languages you use it for, and does it help you program faster? So what we initially launched was Copilot for Individual beta, and then we went GA with Copilot for Individual. And then more recently, we developed an enterprise product called Copilot for Business. And what this lets you do is that this lets you enforce policy controls across your entire organization. There might be certain settings, and you might want to manage billing for the entire organization that's using this. It gives you basically some control over how people are using Copilot. And we highly recommend that if you're a current GitHub Enterprise customer, to reach out to GitHub and we can walk you through what those features are. So we make assignment very quickly. They can authenticate through work. And then also too, we've added some very helpful features like filtering public code matches. What this option is that you can enforce this at the organization level. And what we'll do is that we'll block suggestions that match 150 characters or more. And if you want to learn more about that, please reach out to the GitHub team. So without further ado, I'll stop sharing slides and we'll hop into like a quick demo here. So hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. So here I just have VS Code. It should look very familiar to everybody. Everybody uses code, and myself included. The language that you're seeing here is C#. That's what I learned, and that's what I started developing in. So that's what I'm most comfortable in. So that's what you're getting today, not JavaScript. Sorry, everybody. If you want to get started with Copilot, you simply install the extension. And then once you authenticate through GitHub, now you're ready to rock. What's really neat about this too is that, again, there's no configuration. You'll see that icon down here, that a Copilot symbol, that it's there. There we can disable it if we wanted to, but why would you want to do that? We want to keep it enabled here. So yeah, so the coolest part about Copilot is that I don't need to give you instructions about how to start using it. Meaning that if I just start typing, like I'm going to create a programming language list. This is going to be a new list of strings, let's just say, for example. So immediately, what Copilot's going to do is that it's going to read the line that I'm currently writing. In this case, I'm going to be asking it, I'm writing a programming language list. So what does it do? Immediately, it says, okay, we want to add C# as a programming language. So you can kind of see already that it's already reading what the file is and then creating a result, essentially, a suggestion based upon what it thinks that I want. What you can do too is that you can either hover over it and then you can open this in Copilot, or you can just simply hit Command Enter or Control Enter rather. And what it will do is that it will synthesize different results. So let's just say you want to go more in depth. So in that screen right there, I could have hit Tab and then added the programming language list. But immediately it's reaching out and giving me different suggestions. Okay, great, you want to create a programming language list. Well, here are all the programming languages that you might want to add. And there's different solutions that it's synthesizing, and then I can select the one that I want. So I'm just gonna accept this first one. So immediately it just saved me some time from having to go out and like maybe grabbing that list. And then we can keep doing that. We can keep hitting tab here to add new programming languages, for example. But you can also break out of this too. Instead of just starting the program, you could say, hey, Copilot, I want a method that determines the validity of a credit card number. I know it's kind of random, but immediately it's suggesting an entire algorithm, an entire method here for me. And again, I can hit Command Enter and maybe see what other results it can synthesize. And you can extend this into anything that you might want to do as part of programming. So you can already see that's saving me a bunch of time. Let's just do one more too, like a method, or let's see, create me a web server in C#, for example. So what it will do is I'm going to hit Command Enter here. It's going to say, okay, here's a web server. Here's what I'm doing. We have a request response. We can start a web server. And then, we'll have to import the library for that if we wanted to there, system.net. And you can already see that it's just saving me a ton of time. We suggest too that you read through everything that Copilot's suggesting to you, make sure it makes sense, make sure that you test it. And before I jump back into the slides, there's one more thing I want to show you, just one more thing. So what we launched recently is something called Copilot X. People are asking us about GPT-4 and what's going on with that. So what GitHub recently launched is that we have Copilot X. Now, don't be scared if you can't find this yourself. This is an early preview. Since I work at GitHub, I have access. And we'll have access for everybody in a beta. We'll drop the link into the channel if you want to sign up for early access. We haven't started accepting anybody just yet, but we will soon when it's ready. But what we have here is even a generational improvement from Copilot. What I was showing you before was mostly just, either you start coding or you can start to type a natural language comment, and then we'll generate things like create me a web server in C#. But here you're getting a more chatbot style interface, and even has suggestions here. So let's just say that we want to generate unit tests for the code. So what it will do here is that it will start to do that for me. And you can already see this is actually pretty awesome. It's starting to generate things for me. And then in the beginning here too, I'm your Copilot. I'm here to help you get things done faster. You might want to highlight too, okay, that code that you just generated for me, I'm going to highlight that. And hey, explain this selected code. So what it's going to do is that it's going to explain now what it generated and what this code means. This might be extremely helpful for you too, just if you happen to be learning a new language. It's often the case that whatever language that you're programming in for work is not the language that you know the best. So you might need some assistance on reading some existing code, or if some previous engineer wrote something that you just don't understand, maybe you can ask Copilot to ask it to explain something to you. We even will extend it to in fixing bugs, that if you're having trouble fixing a bug, we can start to have Copilot X suggest a bug fix for you, essentially. But I would say the best part about it is that there are no rules. You can ask Copilot anything. You can type this into the box. So I would just say you just interact with it like you would any other chatbot style interface. So we're really excited about this. I'm going to cut back to the slides here. Please reach out if you have any questions. And I'll take a pause here and see if we have any questions from the group. John or Richard, do we have any questions from the audience?
We've got some great comments going on, a couple of questions in there too. So I'm going to make a couple call outs on the comments first. A couple of people mentioned they use it for Terraform, they use it for Bash. So Glenn's done a great job, showing this off in a standard programming language. But, this works for some of your infrastructure management. This works for, Bash scripting, that sort of thing. So really a wide variety of what Copilot can do. Also, there's a comment in there about folks using it for scientific pipelines. And so I dropped it in as a comment, a little link to another product we have, Code Spaces, which actually allows for instantaneous stand-up of development environments. And the specific one I gave you there was a Jupyter Notebook in Code Spaces. So the combination of Code Spaces and Copilot, super powerful, because what you can do is you can stand up this instant environment. You can even have a Jupyter Notebook already in there. And then you've got Copilot riding along, helping you out with building all of that scientific code inside of it. So a couple of the questions, Glenn, that I want to get to, and I'll go fast through these because I know we're tight on time today. But Corbin's asking if you create a comment implementing an algorithm, will it auto-complete the entire algorithm, right? Maybe you can help me answer this. You've demoed a couple simple examples of, hey, ask for a comment, it kind of gives you what you want. But just reading a little bit into Corbin's question there, I'm wondering if he means, along the lines of, hey, tell it this is how I want you to implement a specific algorithm, or call out an algorithm by name in a comment and have it give you a prompt back for code that might solve for that algorithm.
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to explain a little bit about like how Codex was trained and what it can do. So it's read all the public source code on GitHub for all public repositories, and that's what it's based on. So it's going to learn the methods that are out there, to implement like a web server or determining the validity of a credit card number. I know it's like a weird method that I suggested there, but that's one of them. So what it will do is that either it will take an existing method kind of verbatim that exists within public source code, or it'll synthesize a new method based upon the context that it has and what you're trying to get at. And when you hit, Control Enter there and you open it in Copilot and it's synthesizing your results, those could be entire method blocks that exist within public source code, or it could be creating its own based upon what it thinks that you want. And so I hope that's helpful there. It's going to then, it's not going to say that this has been copy and pasted from public source code, or it's just going to synthesize results. You can read through it and then select which one will be most helpful.
Awesome, thank you, Glenn. Also, one other question I wanna note before hopping on to the next topic. Chris is asking, does Copilot come free with GitHub? So to answer that real quick, there's a personal version and there's a GitHub Copilot for Enterprise version. Those both have slightly different pricing, depending on whether you're using it for your own use or you want your entire business to have it. And I would say, personally, I think the business costs are quite reasonable when you consider that it's something in the order of $20 a month. I can't remember exactly per head. But what we've seen, of course, is, and Glenn's got these proof points up on the screen here, that it, in many cases, will double your developer speed. So most developers I know, they do like to take a salary that's a little bit more than $20 a month. So we like to think of this as a pretty strong net positive for most businesses.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, John, so Copilot for individual is $10. Copilot for business is $19 per seat. And $10, this coffee was $6. I think Copilot would help me more than 2 coffees. There we go. Cool. Any more questions, John, before we jump back into slides here?
I think we should jump on to the next topic, and I'll save everything else for the wrap up at the end. Thank you.
So Sarah, if you just go back to that previous slide there, I just want to share too, like a lot of folks, especially in the enterprise, just ask us like how we can demonstrate this value. I would just say, just do a simple time box experiment, take an hour on a Friday, maybe like like a hack day, lunch and learn type deal, and just give 2 groups a task. So grab 10 people, have 5 of them use Copilot, have 5 of them not use Copilot, and then just measure the length of time that it takes them to complete something. Like we did that for implementing a web server in JavaScript. And the group that had Copilot did it 55% faster. So, we can kind of put a finer point and empirically verify that it does help you complete things quicker. And you can do this, don't take our word for it. You can run this experiment at your own company with your own engineers. Cool. And then just a couple more things on Copilot. So yeah, what we're also seeing too, that we're seeing a higher acceptance rate. Nothing like in, these LLMs and these large language models and within, this new AI world, nothing static. We're constantly improving our own algorithm and our own model. And Copilot X is wielding GPT-4, where the previous one was wielding GPT-3. And what we're just seeing is that we're already seeing a higher acceptance rate too from when we first launched this. So folks are accepting what we're suggesting to them at a quicker rate, and it's being more helpful essentially. So it's already improving even though we just launched this product. Excellent. And then, yeah, I don't have to tell everybody on this talk. You definitely know if you read Twitter about the benefits. We're just always like curious to see every single day, like the new things that people are using this for and how they're finding it useful. There's something always interesting every day. So, okay, cool. So we're going to move on to the next part, which is developer efficiency. We'd also love to hear too from the folks, have you used GitHub Actions? So for the uninitiated, you'll have a tab within your GitHub repository called Actions. What's Actions? So Actions is our integrated CI/CD offering. You can think of it like an integrated Jenkins. But what we do is that we power it with the community of GitHub, meaning that all the files and all the CI/CD scripts that you're going to need to piece together a complex, build and deploy script. Well, we can use the power of GitHub in the community, and both third party and first parties will write these reusable pieces of workflows in the form of YAML. In fact, the GitHub Marketplace right now has 17,000 different workflow files that you can pull down. So if you need to build in a certain language and then deploy to a certain web service, and you need to do linting and all these kind of pieces, it's not that developers don't know how to write a build and deploy script. The limiting factor is usually time, and you can piece together a very complex CI/CD script by using these different pieces. Let me just talk about compute real quick too. Like, what do we run this on? Oh, and I just realized that our slide has 7,000. Yeah, we have 17,000. This is an old slide. We pulled it from an old deck. So quick correction. Oh yeah, 18,000, sorry. It's probably 19,000 by the time I said that. So what computers do these run on? So by default, you can always run on GitHub hosted runners. We have Mac, Linux, and Windows computers that you can run this on. In fact, too, we actually have more powerful runners. Right now they're in beta. I would say too, if you have specific needs for compute, like we work with all kinds of institutions that say that they need like certain GPUs and certain memory and certain SSD. Reach out to the GitHub team. We have more powerful options if it exceeds what you need for the default hosted runners. I want to remind folks too that if you use GitHub at work with GitHub Enterprise, that you have 50,000 minutes to draw upon each month. So you and your team can use this compute that's allocated to you, and that will reset monthly. So definitely use it. We see a lot of folks use it for Macs because those tend to be pretty expensive. But you can also run this on your own hardware as well. Like, let's just say that you have a bunch of machines or you have a preferred cloud provider. You can spin up this compute, and you can install what we call the self-hosted runner with GitHub Actions and hook that up yourself and run it on your own preferred cloud provider. And lastly, I just want to mention too that if you need it to be dynamic, meaning that if you want the compute to be ephemeral, we have a solution called the Actions Runner Controller that can dynamically spin up and tear down compute for self-hosted runners. If you don't want to manage all that, again, GitHub can provide this to you through the GitHub self-hosted runner. The GitHub hosted runner. And again, we support Mac, Linux, and Windows. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Sarah, to do a demo of Actions and take over the presentation. Mute here.
Awesome. We're switching over mics, so you can see we have a little bit of a... No worries. So we had a little bit of an echo here. Sorry about that. So who here has actually used GitHub Actions? Post in the chat if you have used it. What are some of the scenarios that you used it for? Let us know. We're really interested. As Glenn said, GitHub Actions allows you to do a couple of different things. You can see this Actions tab that is in your repositories, and you can click on New Workflow. This is how you can use a lot of the starter workflows that we have built out for you. We have actions available for CI/CD. We have actions available just for automation. You can literally automate everything and anything that is related to a GitHub event with GitHub Actions. The nice thing about it is it understands what the current state of that repository is. So because we know what language you're using, we can actually give you some suggestions on what the starter workflow should be. So in this example here, I have a Docker file in my environment. I have some JavaScript code. I have some HTML code. So it's actually suggesting the different configurations here of what is publishing a Node.js package or running and deploying a Node.js package. If you see here by Okta demo, this is my demo organization, and we actually have some prescribed starter workflows that we created that are enterprise-wide or org-wide and make it more standardized in the way that we're building our own actions. So GitHub Actions today, think of it as one action is the actual workflow, the one step that is running within a workflow, but a workflow allows you to have multiple actions associated to it. So in these examples, we have different Octodemo JavaScript workflows, so we can standardize the way that we're building JavaScript applications and deploying them. We can standardize how we're building out a Node.js project versus some deployments or running our reusable code scanning capabilities. All of this can be integrated with GitHub Actions today. So let's go into an example here and see what's going on. Let's jump into this configuration file here. So what I just did, I just clicked configure a GitHub action. And let me zoom in here so everybody can see what's going on. All right. So today with GitHub Actions are YAML files. So it allows you to have a more humanly readable type of automated workflow that allows you to have auditability associated to it because it's pipeline as code and it's stored in Git. So therefore you have the Git history associated to it, and it's stored specific to that repository. So you can find the right context at the right time for that GitHub action. You can have different triggers. In this example, the trigger is a release trigger. So you can have different types of release, different types of events that happen to a release. So in this case, it's creating a new release triggers these jobs. Think of jobs as running asynchronously, and then the steps are synchronous. So you can have multiple jobs that run asynchronously. You can have a matrix build where you can have 3 different jobs. As Glenn mentioned, you can have an Ubuntu OS or a Mac OS or even a Windows OS operating system. So you can actually have 3 different jobs that kick off to run across all operating systems to test that one application, making your life a little bit easier. The steps here are just checking out the action, setting up npm CI and npm test. And you can see here, I have a set of a different job where I'm publishing my npm package. So those are some examples of what GitHub Actions look like today. As Glenn mentioned, you can build your own workflows or your own actions, but you don't have to. There's a GitHub marketplace associated. In this example here, actually, if you just go to the marketplace overall, you can see every action or app that is associated to GitHub. But let's focus on the GitHub Actions components. Here are GitHub Actions has, in this case, 17,911 results coming back for publicly available GitHub Actions. These GitHub Actions are not black boxes. You can see exactly what's going on in them. They're open source, so you can see what's happening within the action itself, and they're reusable, so you can reuse them as, and you don't have to rebuild from scratch. So in this example here, say I want to run something related to containers. So I can just search container actions. In this example, I could see I have an Azure container registry build. I can use my Anchor container scan for scanning my container, or I can leverage some of the other existing actions out there to build out a cloud native deployment with my GitHub Actions pipeline. With this in mind, GitHub Actions, think of them as reusable CI/CD tools plus, because you don't have to only focus on running CI/CD. You can do automations like labeling something as stale. So you can look up stale actions. So you can say, okay, this is a stale issue. Let's close all stale issues because they've been open for the last couple of months. Probably don't want any issues that are open for the last couple of months with any activity. So you can leverage the closed stale issue in this example here. Actions runs on a compute. So as Glenn mentioned today, you can run your own self-hosted actions runners, or you can use our existing actions runners. So in this example, you can see what I'm setting up from an enterprise level capability to set up those different runners. I can click on use self-hosted, which I'm hosting on my own premise environment or in my own cloud environment, or I can use the GitHub hosted ones. And if I create a new GitHub hosted one, I can actually configure what type of images we want, what type of sizes we want, and some configurations associated to enterprise level settings, such as having static IP addresses. With GitHub Actions today, we've seen a tremendous growth in the way that people are thinking through not only CI/CD, but the way that you're doing like GitOps or anything related to a GitHub event. There's automations associated to that. So let's jump back into our overview here. GitHub Actions today really are CI/CD++ in my mind. They are convertible to make welcoming a new contributor or to run your build job for your JavaScript projects. You can create release notes and draft release notes and make it easier to create that release process. You can set up reminders to look at issues and pull requests again, so you don't have to, forget about something and then you never see it again unless you go into your PRs or your issues view there. And it really allows you to build out your pipeline in a more efficient way, sitting natively into your GitHub repository. Several scenarios that we've seen over the last couple of years is that GitHub Actions are used more and more in cloud native deployments, for example. You can deploy to Azure, AWS, GCP. We work with these vendors directly to build out starter workflows to make it easier for you to start leveraging GitHub Actions right off the bat. We don't think it's necessary to build every single action yourself because somebody else probably has done it already. So why not create that reusable marketplace where you can find these actions much more easily? We've also seen infrastructure as code. I saw in the chat earlier that some people were using Copilot to write some Terraform. Well, we work directly with HashiCorp today with GitHub Actions to implement your Terraform deployments with GitHub Actions. So then you don't have to worry about going to Terraform Enterprise, or if you do, you can automate some of that testing and validation that needs to be done beforehand, leveraging the GitHub Actions pipeline there. GitHub Actions are versatile. You can do many things. So I am very curious to see what type of questions that might have come up in the chat while I was presenting. So John, before we jump into the next session, I wanted to open it up and see if there's any good questions out there.
Absolutely. Tons of activity, some really great use cases, everything from enterprises. We've got Scott talking about how he's actually using GitHub Actions triggered by submitted issues to build teams and to analyze his repos, which is great. We've got some folks talking about how they're using this for, their personal blogs to do everything from, generating featured images with image magic inside them. We've also got some folks asking about migration, right? One person's coming from Bamboo, another person's coming from Jenkins. Maybe it's a good time to talk about the Actions importer.
Yes, that is an amazing question. So today, GitHub Actions has grown so fast and exponentially that we are trying to catch up with a lot of our migration tools. So over the last maybe year and a half, maybe even 2 years, we released our GitHub Actions importer. So if you're using something like Circle CI, GitLab CD, or Jenkins, you can use the GitHub Actions importer to help you import some of those actions pipelines. What I would actually recommend, though, is as you're doing those imports, I wouldn't blatantly just translate from one to another. I would do some cleanup because you're already changing the way your pipeline is going to be running, where it's going to be running, how it's going to be running. You might as well clean up and make those pipelines a lot more efficient. So what we normally recommend is to actually have a plan beforehand, plan that strategy of what that migration will look like. Make sure you're doing your cleanup, you're making your pipelines a little more efficient. So when you bring them over to GitHub Actions, you already have not only the translated code over it, but also just a cleaner pipeline that reduces the amount of minutes that you're running, reduces the amount of time you're waiting to get your results back if you're running like a build job or a test job or a scanning job. But the GitHub Actions importer is available for you to use today. I don't have the link right now on me, but if somebody can put it in the chat, that'd be great. If not, you can always search for GitHub Actions importer and it will come right up in the GitHub documentation.
Very cool. Thank you, Sarah. We've got so much coming in, I can't even keep up with it, but I'm going to pick out 2 more groups of questions here and then hopefully save some more for the end. And folks, we will have a QA at the end, just so you know. And also as a quick reminder, some folks have asked, yes, this will be available for replay next week on galaxy.github.com. So you can come on back and we'll have records there. All right, so the next one I want to jump into, Sarah. We've got one person, we've got Anna, talking about how she deploys across different cloud platforms and orchestrates them all through Actions. But we've got somebody else asking, what about deploying on-prem? And my mind there immediately goes to both self-hosted runners and it goes to, the ability to implement a proxy, for example, inside the action. Maybe you can talk more about that.
Yeah, those are great questions. So definitely seen multi-cloud deployments with GitHub Actions. I actually did a Kubernetes KubeCon conference, Kubernetes CNCF conference that happens twice a year, one in the US and one in Europe. I actually did a multi-cloud deployment example as one of my sessions there, probably like 2-3 years ago, around leveraging GitHub Actions matrix build to deploy to 3 different clouds if you wanted to, or not necessarily 3 different clouds, but 3 different deployment types. So if you wanted to deploy to Azure Web Services and AKS, you could do that with GitHub Action. Or if you wanted to deploy to AKS, EKS at the same time, you could do that with GitHub Action. So those are great examples. Yes, to your point, John, you can run GitHub Actions on-prem. So for a lot of cloud deployments, most of the time for enterprises that are very regulated, they have very restricted environments where they have to have things running on-prem to deploy on-prem. So many cases, the larger runners are one option, but the self-hosted runners are usually more desirable option for that case. So you can use self-hosted runners to deploy on-prem, but today with larger runners, you also have the ability to create a static set of IP ranges for those larger runners that allow you to, have an allow list of those IPs in your maybe firewalls that allow to a specific, deployment place, deployment environment that you're deploying on-prem, to allow those GitHub runners on the cloud to directly deploy to the on-prem, maybe cloud environment that you're running locally. And as John said, you can configure different proxy layers. You can configure how you decide that you want to use your GitHub larger runners on cloud, or the self-hosted ones that you want to maintain in your own environments, and set up the firewalls associated to that. If there are more specific questions around this, I would love for you guys, you can request a demo, and then we can actually go and bring in that direct account team that is working with your company to really talk about the different ways you can deploy those. John, you might be muted, or is my audio?
No, that's my mouse trigger not being fast enough. Thanks for calling that out. All right, I'll wrap up with one last question here on secrets, and we'll move on to advanced security, right? So first off, I've got one individual, Ashish, mentioning that, when secrets are echoed back out to the output, they're replaced with triple star, right? So we should talk about why that is a security feature. And then also, I think they're wondering if they can get a workaround because for some reason they need to be able to log out that secret. I've also got somebody else, David, mentioning they're using multiple deploy environments, using secrets and having some issues there. So maybe we can talk about both the variety of different ways that people can access secrets, whether that's the ones that are stored in the host repo, but also third-party secret managers and how they can connect to those using marketplace actions.
Great questions. So John, to your point, yes, there's a variety of maintaining secrets on the GitHub end as well. So you can have environment secrets or repository secrets or org level secrets. So different layers, or I guess different levels of secrets that you can maintain within GitHub. But what we normally recommend is to use something like a HashiCorp Vault and integrate directly with that. So you don't have to necessarily directly maintain secrets in GitHub, but maintain them in a vault that is specified for secret management. There's also OIDC configuration. So today, you don't need to run necessarily secrets directly within the GitHub repositories. You can also configure actions to leverage OIDC. So therefore, you can maintain your secrets in like Google's secret management tool, or in HashiCorp Vault, or in AWS's secret management tool, or even Azure's, and directly work through OIDC to configure tokens that are short-lived or that have a specific RBAC associated back to them. If you are interested in that, there is a great documentation on how OIDC works and how you can integrate that with GitHub Action in our documentation. And I highly recommend maintaining some of those secrets there rather than maintaining them in GitHub. But nonetheless, maintaining them in GitHub does provide some security as well. So you don't necessarily need to hold them somewhere outside. But for enterprise level type of workloads, we highly recommend using a secret store that is meant for secret management. So if you can easily rotate them, maintain them, and connect back to them without having to worry about maintaining them specific in a repository, or having the admin burden of maintaining them in a repository or in an org. There are some security best practices as well, or security hardening around GitHub Actions if you do decide to use them on-prem or in cloud, and as well also available in our docs. So that's somewhere you can look up security hardening for Actions, and it will give you all the best practices that we have there.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And just to address some things that are coming through on the secrets question too in the chat right now before we move on, lots of folks offering ways that you could export your secrets into logging. The one thing I'd say about that is, even if you're base 64ing them or anything, there's always a risk anytime you do that. So please absolutely make sure that however you're outputting that, you're encrypting that output, something to keep them secure. If what you're looking to do is just verify that your workflow run is using the right secrets, I'd suggest simply truncating, outputting the last or first 3 of your secret so that you can match it up against what you know without creating a new security risk. All right, with that, we'll try and answer anything else we can at the end. But Sarah, I don't want to stop you from moving on to advanced security, right?
Yeah, actually, so talking about secret leakage is one of the biggest items that we do want to talk about in general. It's very easy and very common to accidentally put secrets in plain text in your repository. And we highly, highly recommend against maintaining any secrets. Even if you believe they're low-level secrets, we highly recommend do not store plain text secrets in your GitHub repository. So how can you prevent that? How can you really do that? Is by leveraging some of our advanced security features. So jumping into it, I wanted to give like an overview and baseline of where our mentality is, where our vision is, and how we kind of start building a lot of the tooling that we're building for advanced security in that developer flow a lot more seamlessly. So we did a study actually from 2016 to 2020 that even though the number of lines of code are increasing and people's awareness of security threats are also increasing, so is the number of vulnerabilities. So despite everybody being a lot more aware about secrets and vulnerability management and being a lot more aware of recent security exploits that were happening, the lines of code and the lines of security threats associated to that code are increasing at the same rate. What we really want to do to resolve that is to really have a not only reactive but proactive ways of maintaining that earlier on in the development cycle. What we've noticed is that if you increase your security understanding and embedding that more natively in the development phases earlier on, then you will have a complete reduction of vulnerabilities and security attacks that might happen later on in the stages. Nobody likes having, you're deploying something to production and you're about to deploy, or you maybe already deployed it. And then the pen test team comes back and says, hey, I noticed like we can easily introduce a SQL injection in this. You want to detect that way earlier on, as fast as you can and as soon as you can, to make those fixes while you still have the right context in the development phase, not 2 months later when you're in production and you completely forgot about that one feature you built maybe 2 months before. So what can GitHub do today? How can we really do that? GitHub Advanced Security is meant to be a developer-focused type of security process that allows you to build security natively in your development flows. We believe GitHub sits where the developer sits. You're interacting with GitHub day in, day out. You're creating your pull requests. You're adding your code changes. You're creating GitHub issues to track the projects if you want natively within GitHub. There's just so much that you could do today with GitHub that it's where developers sit to leverage Copilot, for instance, to leverage code spaces and actions and all the different components that come through within the developer ecosystem that sits on GitHub. So what we really wanted to do is really build a native security flow within the day-to-day work that you're doing with GitHub. But enough slides. I think I've slided enough. Let's go back into some live demos. Let me X out of some of these. So today, what you can see is that there's a security tab available in your GitHub repository. When you actually click on that security tab, and let's give that overview first. So when you click on that security tab, you can see you have your Dependabot alerts, your code scanning alerts, your secret scanning alerts. And we actually give you some overviews on like, hey, do you have a security policy enabled? Do you have some of your security advisors enabled? So those are different components that you can see within that security tab. With advanced security, there are additional components that you might not see if you don't have advanced security. Today, code scanning and secret scanning are the two core components that we'll be chatting about, but there's also dependency review that allows you to incorporate some pull request integrations with Dependabot that is also part of advanced security. When we go into advanced security, we can actually see some of our secrets here. In secret scanning today, we have 70 plus vendors that we work with directly to get the different regexes and different patterns for their secrets. If you're using a Google API token, if you're using an Azure AWS token, a Stripe API key, we'll work directly with those vendors to gather the regex information that's associated to be able to detect those secrets that are in plain text and accidentally pushed into your GitHub repository. So back to your points earlier on, if you have some secrets in your configuration files and you accidentally committed them into your GitHub repository, this is a great thing to kind of turn on and discover those secrets. But secrets is a common term, or secret scanning is a common thing that we think about being reactive. What we really want to do to prevent anything like this happening is to be a lot more proactive. So how do we do that? Today, we actually allow for push protection. So you can enable push protection. If we go back into your settings under the code and security and analysis section here, you can see that there are a couple different settings that we can configure. One of this is push protection. Push protection allows you to block a push from coming in if there's a secret that is detected in that push. So if you're working locally in your machine, it will actually say, hey, this commit or this push is not able to come into the github.com ecosystem until you resolve this secret. There's ways to bypass it because we don't want to create a complete stopgap. We want to make sure that there are ways that if people need to push against a secret just for production level reasons, they can, but it will all be audited and you'll be able to see all of that in that security tab across the board of all the secrets that are being detected. So if anybody accidentally goes and deploys a secret without realizing, or if they're going and bypassing push protection, they'll all be available in the secret tab here. With secrets, we've noticed that secrets in general have been the largest exploits over the last several years, just because if somebody is able to access in your GitHub repository, doesn't always mean they have access to your AWS environment. But if they accidentally discover, or if they are able to discover that AWS client key in that repository, that is when you might get some Bitcoin miners spinning up random servers across your AWS environment and racking up a lot of dollars that might not have necessarily been been a good practice in the first place. So having that proactive and reactive detection really allows you to have that auditability across the board, helping you fix those vulnerabilities a lot faster and get you a better understanding of what's going on within the secret side of things. But with GitHub Advanced Security today, you don't only see advanced security around secret scanning. You could see when we talk about code scanning, that's the other aspect. Code scanning today is a platform that allows you to detect vulnerabilities across the board around any other tooling and our own internal tooling that allows you to detect SaaS type of vulnerabilities. So today, code scanning is a platform that you can integrate with third-party tools or use CodeQL. CodeQL is a query language that allows you to do analysis and a pattern detection across your code base to detect different vulnerable patterns. So if we go into an example here, we can actually click on show paths and see where this SQL injection was created, where it was actually introduced in the source, and where it's being exploited in the exploit section here when it's running an execute query. And you can see that data path flow through the environment, through your code base to detect, okay, maybe it's the best place to fix this security vulnerability in step number 7. So maybe I need to run some sanitization here. But there are multiple paths. It's not one path to that sync or one path to that exploit. There are 3, or in this case, there are 6 different paths that are available to detect, like, hey, this vulnerability is not only being introduced in the string name, but it's also might be introduced in the string auth10 that is being received in this public attack result here. So what you want to do is actually detect and understand where the variances are and find the common denominator across all of them to fix that vulnerability. So I gave a really quick overview of code scanning, but code scanning in this specific environment, I'm talking about CodeQL. So I gave a really quick overview of CodeQL. What you can also see is a recommendation, an example, and integrations directly with a pull request. So you can enforce that at the pull request level. You can do this not only with CodeQL, but any third-party scanners you decide to integrate with code scanning. Code scanning today, again, bringing that community aspect, we work with so many vendors and partners and platforms to make sure that we understand that it's not one path fits everybody's scenario, it's multiple paths fit everybody's scenario. So, or fit multiple people's scenarios. So in this case here, we work directly with our community to bring in the right partners to integrate with our code scanning platform. So if you want to do container scanning, if you want to do infrastructure as code scanning, you can do all of that. But again, going back to our overview here, I will pause, see if there's any questions that are of interest, and then we can jump into an example scenario of how you can leverage both code scanning and secret scanning, and also incorporate actions to build out a pipeline.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, one thing that somebody did bring up that might be worth addressing, they were mentioning how they've used GitHub Advanced Security for producing their own Sarah files. And apologies if you covered this already. I was looking at questions pretty heavily, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about the relationship between Sarah files and GitHub Security.
Yes, that's a great question. So today, when you go in the security tab and you go into code scanning, you can actually configure multiple tools. If you decide to integrate with Seraph, you can integrate directly with the code scanning API, and then the results will be visible right in the security tab, as well as your pull request. So you get that exact same experience as you get with CodeQL with Seraph integration from third-party tools. So if you had more than one tool, you'll be able to see all of those tools in one place and be able to actually break down. In this case, we have a couple other tools. None of them are producing results in this example here, but you can see all the tools and filter down with them to see what results they have regarding the Seraph inputs that you're pushing through. So with the Seraph integration, it's so easy to integrate with third-party tools. But at the end of the day, CodeQL also produces Seraph. So if you have a third-party platform that you want to push all of the results to, you can use CodeQL to push out Seraph outputs as well. So it's more of a two-way communication in that sense.
Awesome, thanks. And then someone else asked, and Glenn put a link into the chat here, so you can look for that there. But just to reiterate, are there ways to en masse retroactively turn this on for all of somebody's private repos, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit about enterprise account level and organization level controls.
Yes, great questions. So we recently released a one-click turn on for your CodeQL analysis, and you can explore ways to incorporate third-party tools. So today we have a default setup where if it's a language that doesn't really need any compilation, so if it's a compatible language that we can turn that default setup on, you can enable that default setup to be turned on across your code base. So this can be done at the org level. And then actually, let's jump into a live example of what the enterprise settings look like. So when you go into your enterprise settings, here's the view that you see for your actions enterprise settings. But if you go into your code security analysis, here's where you can see all of the configurations that you have for your enterprise level security features. So you can see what you can enable the advanced security capabilities and availability across everywhere, or you can even enable secret scanning across everywhere. And if you dive deeper into the security features, you can actually set up new custom patterns with secret scanning as well across the enterprise. So that's something I didn't really touch on when we quickly went over the secret scanning items. So there are different level policies that you could set up at the enterprise level, at the org level, and at the repository level.
Brilliant. And you had a little bit of a live demo you wanted to run right at the end here. I think we're at about 8 minutes. So I think we've got time for that, or a scenario rather. And then we'll take general questions after.
Yeah, great. So just to recap, with advanced security today, we touched on two major items, secret scanning and code scanning. The last item I did not touch was the security overview. So if you go to your overview of your Octo demo, of your repository, of your organization, at the org level, you'll be able to see a security tab as well, and that will give you your security overview across the board. So that's something I would highly recommend. We can do an even deeper dive demo. If you request a demo, we can jump into more of a succinct demo that covers all the different aspects of secret scanning, code scanning, security overview, and some of the dependency reviews all around advanced security. So that being said, the couple items that we covered were secret scanning, code scanning, quickly touched on security overview. But how do you incorporate some of these in an example scenario? So today, your typical workflow, and this is my personal experience, so this is my typical workflow. I introduce some code changes, I create a pull request, I build my action, or I use GitHub Actions to build my image and run my image, and then I merge the PR, everything tests, all the tests pass, and then I assume my development is completed. Then my QA team comes in, my security scan comes in, and everything starts, this is fine, everything's on fire, but we're gonna figure it out. I'm missing a couple deadlines. I'm struggling to figure out, okay, what did I even do like 2 months ago? Or when did I even build this feature? Is it this specific feature? Was it this specific PR? I can't even remember anymore because you compile so many features and certain PRs. If you have multiple PRs for a feature, there's different ways of doing development that by the time you get your security scanning and your automation to do the deployments to your production environment, you're kind of out of context. So what I would actually recommend would do an improved workflow where you can incorporate your parallel security scans. You can leverage GitHub Actions to do this, or you can leverage Jenkins, Circle CI, whatever CI/CD tool you want, but incorporating that parallel security scan at the time of the pull request. So today, it might take a little more work to standardize that, but it will save you so much time and effort and frustration, to be honest, because you don't want to notice it later on and not be able to fix it because you forgot what you did. But if you notice it earlier on, it's in the pull request, it's right when you're ready to receive feedback, that's really when you want to incorporate a lot of your scans. In this improved scenario, I'm introducing a PR, I'm building my job, I'm running my build job so I can build my application. And then if I'm using container-based environments, I will run my container scanning because I'll build an image during my build job. I can run my dependency scans. So some of the SBOM capabilities that you might have heard of throughout these last couple Galaxy sessions, our dependent bot capabilities, our dependency review, our static code analysis. You can use CodeQL. You can incorporate code scanning third-party partners as well as infrastructure as code, maybe something like Prisma or TFSec. If you're using some of these third-party tools, you can integrate directly with code scanning to incorporate your infrastructure as code scanning, your container as code scanning, your static analysis, and your SCA analysis all happening in that pull request. So you get all of your results, all of your scanning done with the right context at the right time, and you don't have to remember what you did 2 months later. You can now know what you did at that pull request and fix it within that pull request. And then everything goes well, and you're merging your test, all of your scans pass, you're good to go, you're finally deploying your image, you're not missing your deadlines, and you're incorporating everything earlier on in the life cycle. That was my example scenario, and I actually did this similarly again at KubeCon. There is a sample of this somewhere outside in the internet, and it's at the KubeCon 2022 North America conference link. So if you're interested and you want to find out more about it, I can send you that link, or you can request a demo and we can go through and do more deep dives across all of the scenarios that I talked about today. And that's what I had. John, let's open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And we've only got about 4 minutes left, so this will be a little bit tight. One thing that has come up in this kind of the intersection of Copilot and security, right? So I wanna jump in on this. Does GitHub Copilot help reduce or prevent security vulnerabilities?
Glenn or I could definitely take that. So there are ways that you can leverage Copilot to help you write better code today. Think of Copilot as your Copilot, not as an autopilot. So you can leverage Copilot to find different writing something. So in today's GA available product, there are ways that you can just look through and synthesize different ways of writing something to eliminate that SQL injection. You can even prompt it to say, hey, maybe I can do this without SQL injection happening. But there are new Copilot X features that are coming out that can maybe help a little more. So I don't know, Glenn, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, just one more additional comment there, that if you're already using a language right now to discover vulnerabilities within your code base, like CodeQL, for example, you can also use Copilot to supercharge that ability, meaning that if you're having difficulty, because not everybody's a security researcher, and not everybody knows maybe exactly how to type to find a vulnerability, but supercharged with Copilot, essentially, you can increase your ability then to find CodeQL vulnerabilities by using the autocomplete functionality of Copilot. So I would say too, like it will sort of enable you to use your current tools even better than how you're doing it today. And then as Sarah mentioned, we're coming out with beta features right now with regards to maybe making more secure by asking Copilot to do it for you.
Yeah, we've seen many scenarios where generative AI has just been changing the way that we're thinking through things and vulnerability management and just how we're doing an analysis across our code base. So, I mean, we are still figuring out the best ways to handle a lot of things. So at the end of the day, the things that you're seeing with Copilot today are just the beginning. So just keep an eye out and see what we learn and come back with in the next couple of months, next couple of years.
All right, awesome, folks. Glenn, if you could move us forward to that survey slide. It's time for us to wrap up. We have hit just about 1 o'clock. So I want to thank everybody who jumped on today. If we didn't get a chance to follow up on your questions, just hit that button there to get a demo from us to dive in deeper. We'll do our best to get back to you and answer what questions you have, fill you in with more information on GitHub Enterprise. Also, a reminder that all of the recordings are going to be available next week, once again, right here at galaxy.github.com. So with that, we're going to close out, ask you to hit that survey link that you're seeing up on your screen right there. Love to hear your feedback, what you thought of today's sessions and all of Galaxy so far. So go forth, let's build from here. It's been great having you. And Sarah, Glenn, thank you so much for an amazing session today.
Thank you all. Have a galactical time over the last couple of days. So enjoy the rest of the sessions. If you didn't get to watch them, make sure you jump on and watch them next week.
Thanks all. See you next time.
Thank you.